Hey there guys, welcome back to the channel, and today we're gonna talk about why can West not be trusted. And there is a lot of reasons why. I'm gonna name some of the reasons that bug me the most. So let's start with a simple one. They are promising and even signing these deals with people with other countries that in the end they are not respecting. So let's start with the obvious one, that is a very big one, and that is One China policy. Now, in One China policy, it was signed on January 1st, 1979. And it says it really clearly here that the US government recognized the government of the People's Republic of China, which is China, mainland China, as the sole legal government of China, which includes Taiwan as a Chinese territory and basically dismisses the Taiwan as a country. But on the other hand, they are doing everything to oppose that, even though they signed it, even though they respect it, and when they are questioned about it, they are saying that that is Chinese land. And in reality, they are not respecting that. So I don't know if you remember when Nancy Pelosi, or whatever her name was, visited Taiwan, and they kind of did say that they're gonna do that, and Chinese government responded with, that is our land and you have no right to be there. There is no reasons for you to come here. So we are not going to allow this. So US did what US does the best. They forced their way in Taiwan by sending a bunch of military, fighter jets, and I think even Navy was present in the Chinese Sea, escorting this Nancy for some military talks with Taiwan, military cooperation talks with Taiwan. Now, I don't know how you think you're doing this with a country that legally, that you signed, doesn't exist. You're basically doing it with China, and China doesn't agree with it, so you send your military and you get there anyway. So legally that should be classified as a military invasion, and China should have nuked US no problem. Like, it would be completely legal. You don't have the right to do that because you sign treaties and you are supposed to respect them. But nevertheless, they did that. They sent some military equipment to Taiwan, even though China once again protested. They even sent, I think it was this year, they sent some military people there, apparently, like some sort of troops, a few thousand, just to train Taiwan's military, to exercise with them. How would you feel if China just went to Texas against your will, forced their way into there with their military, and then sent some of their troops to train just people from Texas? Like, that would be insane, right? Well, when you look from the other side, that's exactly what happened in China. So you signed One China policy, you legally do not see Taiwan, don't recognize Taiwan as a country, yet you're doing everything the opposite of what you signed. The other example would be with dispute with Russia. So with Russia, they had something a little bit different. It was with the Soviet Union when which Putin is still saying this stuff, and I don't see the point why, but still, when NATO kind of gave them a verbal, as they like to say it, verbal promise not to expand NATO eastwards towards Russia. And they said that they would not expand. So that clearly didn't happen, and Putin is very furious about this because Russians are not like the West. Russians are writing everything down. They have everything documented. They have it. You don't have to sign it. You said it. But as the West likes to weasel out of everything, and they like to say it today, they were like, well, where is the document of that? Where is our signature? We didn't sign this. No, somebody told us to you, so maybe he did, maybe he didn't. There is no proof, there is no signature. Well, if we look back on One China policy, there is a signature, but what are you doing? So they did that with Russia. That was a promise that was not signed. So it's like, okay, we can brush that off as Russia did. They don't really care. They kind of let that happen, let NATO expand. But they did have this specific deal about Ukraine, because Ukraine was, and I'm pretty sure they signed this. You can look it up, but as far as I can tell, they did sign it. That Ukraine is supposed to be this big country in between two blocks, between NATO and Russia, because that's a massive front line if you decide to go to war. If Ukraine joined NATO or Russia, it would be a massive front line that they would have to deal from both sides. So obviously they made an arrangement that Ukraine is going to be this neutral country with very little army, and if either side tried to take over, the other side would get involved and save them. So Ukraine was basically a buffer state. So Ukraine did respect this for quite a while, until obviously 2014 or something, when the whole fighting with the Russian population in their own territory started, in Ukraine's borders, obviously. France and Germany went like, okay, we're gonna fix this because Russia keeps complaining to the UN. They still, for some reason, follow international laws that these guys are writing but not respecting. So they still did their part. And France and Germany signed a Minsk agreement, which you probably heard of, which was basically making sure that Russia is not gonna have to face these problems anymore to see their population, their ethnic people being shelled in another country with no repercussions. And Germany and France signed this. This is signed. There is a signature. So why didn't you respect it? And they didn't respect it, as you could probably tell. As a matter of fact, it was being said by the Russians that shelling got even worse. And France and Germany were kind of just staring at clouds, just didn't care. And still not only that they didn't care, they also supplied them with weapons. Even back then. So Russians were always kind of fighting them by supporting their own people to defend themselves, not to attack anyone, but to defend themselves. And that was kind of counted as a war, but it wasn't a war. It was just some skirmishes, basically, some fightings. And everybody ignored that. Everybody was like, oh, that is fine. But yet another signature signed that was not respected. Again, they made a deal that Ukraine is this neutral country. What did US do? US built, as we found out, I think last year, when Russians found a bunch of US chemical labs in Ukraine, where they occupied the territory of Ukraine, and US was threatening Russia to not steal stuff from it, and to not say it publicly what's happening in there. And Russians kept quiet, weirdly enough. They did say we found labs, they didn't say what they found in them. They did say something about some viruses or something that were being experimented on, but they are not really sure because Ukrainians kind of busted the place before they left. So it is what it is. If there was a deal for Ukraine to be a neutral state, why did you send them weapons? Why did you enable them to shell ethnic Russians? Why did you make deals with them to bring your chemical military labs into Ukraine? This is all pulling towards West. This is no longer that neutral state everybody had in mind. So obviously Russia was pissed off, and it happened as it happened. So you had, and you can still find these videos, because we are now pretending like Ukraine was attacked unprovoked and that they were just minding their own business. Like, no, we didn't shell any Russians. Russians were shelling us. But you can go back to 2014, maybe 13, and in that period, basically, you can find even the Western news, like I'm pretty sure CNN, Fox at the time, covered these stories, and they were in Ukraine, and they had interviews with people with native Russians, with ethnic Russians, and showing their houses, their streets being shelled, showing the damage of shelling. And it was reported even in the West that Ukraine is doing this and that this needs to be stopped. And now we are pretending like that didn't happen. You can still find the videos. You can still find the interviews. You can still find the whole thing. And they're acting like it didn't happen. Why? That is so weird. So let's move on to the aid to Ukraine. Like, this is not something, military aid, this is not something West would sign like 100 years ago and we would forget until now. This was happening rapidly. Like, week after week, they were changing their stance, and that didn't make any sense to me. So at first they sent some, I remember Germany sending some military helmets. That was their military aid at start. They were sending those, and some of the uniforms, military uniforms, were being sent. Some small amount of bullets, some guns, very small help. At the time it was just a special military operation, it wasn't war, so Russia was sending warnings, but it wouldn't do anything about it for obvious reasons. Because it's not a war. They didn't sign a declaration of war, and for some reason they still decide to respect that. And I don't know. It's weird. Then when Ukraine clearly started losing, as everybody expected, there were some talks about, oh, maybe we should send them some more weapons, like more advanced weapons. So they have problems with a lot of Russian tanks that Ukraine doesn't have. Maybe we should send them some javelins or something. And that was just suggested at first. So eventually they did send it. And then there were talks about, well, let's send them some tanks. We're thinking about sending some tanks. And Russia warned them. Like, this is not a joke anymore. We're talking about actual tanks. And they were like, nah, we're not gonna send tanks. That would provoke Russia a bit too much and whatever. And like a week later, they're like, we're gonna send tanks. We're sending tanks. And everybody's sending tanks to Ukraine, which is insane. And then there were talks about some other stuff. And it was always like that. Like, we suggest it, and then we see how people react. And then we do it anyway. But first we said, no, we're not gonna. So they promised they would not send any type of missiles that could hit deep into Russia. They sent them. And I'm pretty sure that British were the first ones to send them. And Russia blew up the facility where they were storing them. They blew up most of them. They still had some. And they send them anyway. So why'd you say you're not? I mean, they did say we're not gonna send weapons that can hit deep into Russia. And they did send them, but they told Ukraine to not use it for that. What do you mean? If not use it for that, then send them missiles that cannot go that far. It's that simple. You have them. It's not like all of your missiles can just go 10,000 kilometers and that's it. It's not how it works. You have smaller missiles that can do the same job but not go that far. They sent those on purpose. They said that they would not send any type of nuclear weapons to Ukraine. Again, British sent them uranium-enriched tank shells that are spreading radiation once exploded, obviously. Russia once again blew up most of them in the middle of Ukraine in their facility, storing facility. I cannot even imagine how much radiation is still there, because it doesn't go away overnight. That is some nuclear type stuff and you should not be playing around with it. They send it anyway. They still say it's illegal by UN standards, but for some reason British have them and they sent them away to kill Russians with it. But they're not at war. They're not enemies. It's completely fine. We just send it because, you know, they said they would never send any planes, fighter jets, F-16s in particular. They would never send them to Ukraine. Guess what they're doing? And they sent already a few. So what's the point of you keep saying something that you're not gonna do and then do it? Like, this is not 100 years ago, so we forget. We see it every day. So we can clearly see that NATO at some point promised Russia to not move eastwards. Yet they did. So that theory, as West calls it, is more and more looking like it actually happened. Because they keep doing this, and you can see it. Like, this is not 1940s, and you see some nonsense on TV, even if you had a TV, you can see these people every goddamn day talking about these things and then just brushing them off like they didn't even say it. This is nuts! And also there was a thing where basically US told the EU that everybody has to send some weapons to Ukraine and some financial aid. And in the EU, the system is like they have to all vote for it, or if one country votes against it, it doesn't go through. So the EU politics were very not union-like, because European Union, that union was very stupidly made. So what happened, the problem was Hungary, because Hungary refused to invoke sanctions against Russia, because they realize they depend on them and they don't want to shoot themselves in the legs just because the US said so. So the whole inflation went up, as we all know. The money is worth less. You need more of it. That's what inflation is. And there was something, it was Hungary's turn to receive some funds from the EU, and those funds, the amount of money they were supposed to receive, were determined before the inflation. So Viktor Orban said, well, we will provide aid to Ukraine, but first we need to look at the amount of money we're supposed to receive, because it was this much, but now that is not worth the same, so we clearly need more money. EU agreed. You have every right to say that. It is true, inflation is happening. We will give you more money, but first, you send help to Ukraine. So they did. And guess what EU did? They didn't give them their money. Of course they didn't. What did you expect is gonna happen? So it doesn't matter. Later on, there was again some sending military aid to Ukraine, and obviously Hungary had enough of it and said, no, we're not sending any military equipment to Ukraine, and especially not through Hungary. One country didn't vote for it. That means, well, it doesn't go through. So the next voting cycle comes on, and the proposition for it is, we are voting now for the next cycle of voting. We are voting for a new rule where Hungary's vote doesn't count. Who agrees to this? Everybody agrees, again, except Hungary, but Hungary is in this voting biased, so we're not gonna count that. So again, comes another cycle of voting. Proposition, again, the same proposition as before, sending military equipment, military assist, military help to Ukraine. Everybody's voting for. Hungary votes against. Oh, but based on the previous voting cycle, we already voted that in this voting cycle, Hungary's vote doesn't count. So it goes through. This is democracy. This is union. Which is... What are you doing? That doesn't make any sense. This is what West likes to do. They like to weasel their way around it. It's never straightforward with them. It's always signing something, then not respecting it, talking about democracy, but then doing something like this, very stupid. You don't say what you do. You order everybody around in the world, oh, you can't have this, you can't have that, you cannot have nuclear weapons. But we have about 8,000 of them. Can literally destroy the whole planet. But we are telling you, you cannot have that because we are better than you, we are good, and everybody else is bad. So we are good to have it, nobody else can have it. By what? Based on what? If we look at the history, we can clearly say that US is not the force of good as they claim to be. So why do they have so many nukes? Why doesn't UN just go like, hey, you need to calm down? And if we are in NATO, spread your nukes around. Give Romania about 1,000 nukes. Give Poland about 1,000 nukes. You can give each country enough nukes if you really are alliance, but you are not. You claim to be an alliance, but I can only see US troops all over the Europe and other NATO countries, but I don't see a single European soldier anywhere near US. So if that's not occupation, I don't know what it is. It's not an alliance, that's for sure. But hey, US likes to talk these nice things, talking about nice stuff. For example, I love their connections with China, their diplomatic approach, where they are always talking really rudely about China, like openly just saying everything that they can say wrong about China. And whenever they need money and they need to borrow some, they can't borrow from their broke-ass NATO countries, all of their puppet states, so they need to go and beg China. When that is happening, China is good. We're talking about China like the most beautiful place in the world, and we visit them, and Antony Blinken is shaking hands with the Xi Jinping, and they are laughing, and they made some really good deals, and everything is fine. And then a week later, they're sending military equipment to Taiwan because China is gonna attack and China is evil and we need to stop China. Like, dude, you just borrowed money from this guy. You don't do this to him. What are you doing? If you don't like him, don't go back for money to him. Like, what? It's so obvious. You're not supposed to act like this. You are some sort of force of good. If you're some sort of force of good, then be just. Say, dude, we don't have any money. We have to do something about it. And something about it, if US wants to get some money, how about you lower your goddamn military spending? That is the biggest military spending in the world. All countries combined in the world don't have as much as US has alone. Simmer it down. You don't own the entire planet. I know you have military bases all over the planet, but your people at home don't have healthcare. The homelessness is just rampant. Like, what do you think you're doing? People are gonna figure it out sooner or later. I just don't know how stupid they are to not see this, but you know, we will see, I guess. But this whole thing where they say one thing but do the other, but when you do it wrong, they're like, oh, you're supposed to do it like this. Why? You're not respecting that rule. Why should I? Well, because we are good and we can break rules sometimes. You're bad, you have to follow them. And weirdly enough, Russia is following them. Why? Stop following them. It doesn't make any sense. They're not following it. You don't follow it. They made the rules. You all together made the rules. And now one side just decides, nah, I did sign this, but I'm not gonna, comply with it. We did say this, but we're gonna act like we didn't. Like, what? What do you mean? And how exactly, if we wanna stop the war in Ukraine right now, how exactly are we supposed to be like, how Russia, for example, how is Russia supposed to come up to the peace talks where NATO is gonna be involved, where NATO has no place to be in? How can they possibly make any type of deals with each other when clearly we can see the West is not respecting any of it? So if there are gonna be any peace deals between Russia and Ukraine, it's most likely not gonna have West anywhere near it. Because obviously, like they said, we would never send troops to Ukraine. That would be a direct conflict with Russia, and that would be an act of war. They're sending troops to Ukraine right now. What do you mean? We saw this like a year ago. You said these things. What changed? Nothing. Nothing changed. Just you change. We literally saw this a few days ago. I mean, probably a week ago. Depends when I'm posting this. But we saw it when US promised we would not invade Iran if Israel and Iran end up in a war. We will not get involved in that war directly. Guess what? Election's gonna happen. Trump is most likely gonna win. And he's gonna say different stuff. This is why they are not signing it. Because it's gonna be easy for them to say, well, the previous ones that were in charge, they said this, they're stupid. Now we say something else. You see, that doesn't happen in Russia. That doesn't happen in China. What they sign, what they say, is what it is. And yes, I do remember that because US is basically spying on the whole world with their satellites, and that's apparently not breaking any international laws, I don't know how, but they spotted a bunch of Russian military equipment being moved from Moscow to close to Ukraine before the invasion started. And Putin did say we are not going to war with Ukraine. And technically he was right, if you are really gonna be nitpicking, but in the end he did go to war with Ukraine. But when he said it, we're not going to war with Ukraine, he was correct to say it because he did not go to war with Ukraine. He did his special military operation, which once again, I have no clue if it's even a thing or he just made it up. So it was supposed to be that, like a week or two, get in, remove the government, put a different one, get out. That's it. No need for the war. But then they made something different out of it because the West got involved. They moved back, formed the front line. Now it's a war. So yeah, I don't know how they're gonna make any deals with the West when West is clearly not respecting any of their promises, any of their deals. Even about Nord Stream pipeline, that was the biggest terrorist attack, ecological disaster in, well, recorded history. And when Russia, China, and Brazil on the UN summit proposed that UN should get involved, all countries together, we go and investigate who did it, because this is a historically the biggest eco-terrorism ever. So Brazil votes yes, China votes yes, Russia votes yes. US and their puppet states vote no. And there we go, no investigation. I wonder who did it. The guy who is just full of ice cream all over his lips, saying he didn't eat the ice cream, and he's like, let's not question it. That's who did it. We all know. Why are we pretending like we don't know? We know. It was being said that they would do it. They already talked about this. There is evidence everywhere, and they're pretending, no, we didn't do it. And nobody's ever gonna be prosecuted for that. For the biggest eco-terrorism ever. Nobody's being prosecuted. I don't want to, like, there is so many things, like when they found cocaine in Congress or something. Was ever anyone judged for it? Was ever anyone, like, did they find out who did it? They have cameras all over the place. They found cocaine. Look who sat there. Who was sitting there? It's his. You have cameras that they watch their faces. They see them from all over the place. Why is nobody being prosecuted? It's cocaine. You arrest people for a little bit of weed, but you have cocaine, so it's fine. Do as I say, not as they do. Every goddamn time. This is the Western diplomacy, the Western thinking that they don't understand and they don't respect, and I will never expect anything good from them. When they say we're not doing this, expect they're gonna do it. Maybe they're not gonna, like, even Trump, when Trump came in power, he got Obama out of the White House, he got in the White House, Obama had the health plan, healthcare, called Obamacare for some reason. And Trump, the first thing that he did, he was like, no more Obamacare. We're gonna be implementing the better, more, like, everything, more greater, better healthcare plan than Obamacare. We're gonna do it. It's gonna be great. It's gonna be this and that. And they just removed Obamacare. There is no more healthcare for Americans. And then they never did implement anything else. Where did all that money go? Well, we know where it went. It went straight into military. And it never changed. And their taxes are one of the most, like, highest taxes in the world are in the US. And they cannot afford healthcare for their citizens. This is hilarious to the rest of the world. Like, come on, what do you mean? Fix your shit. Stop telling everybody else they suck, they're shitholes of a country, they're this, they're that. We're the only ones that are free. Free to do what? To get sick and die because you don't have any money? In my country is free. You can never work a day in your life. You got a healthcare. You get yourself a doctor, you get everything. It's all free. And we are considered a third world country, but no, US is free and epic and great. Doesn't have a healthcare. But what are you even? Even China, that is communist, has better healthcare than you. Not better, marginally better. I don't know. I went off the tracks as usual. It's just, I get pissed off. I just like talking about things that don't make any sense to me. That's what it is. So when you listen to these guys, the point of the video is when you listen to the West making promises, signing treaties, signing whatever they sign, doesn't matter. Whatever they say, doesn't matter. In the end, they do anything they like. And it doesn't matter. Nobody gets prosecuted. Everything is fine. So, yeah. Thank you for being with me today. And Subscribe. I'll let you know what they're cooking while you're not looking, and I'll see you on the next one.